Marty, you're on. Um,
All
we
right.
have 1 minute, so everybody that's just logged on to the call, it's still echoing, so I don't know.
All right.
There. Okay.
All right. So we got everybody muted except you and me.
Yes.
Yes?
Okay.
Okay, excellent.
So welcome. This is Marty Kane's talk. Marty Lucas. Excuse me.
Marty.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. You've changed, Marty Kane. That's from a long time ago. I apologize. Okay, this is Joan Reed, hopefully being a wonderful moderator for Marty Lucas. We have everyone muted at this point, and this will only be temporarily, but there's so many vibrations that happen when everybody can speak at once. We've muted you for the first 45 minutes. If you have questions, then you're welcome to go to the open chat and type in some kind of a question, and we will get to it as soon as we can. If you bring your cursor over to the right side of the screen, you'll see a chat button. Move the cursor down over this blue little menu. You'll see a chat room. You'll see participants. You'll see a number of different things that you can use. We are going to keep you muted until, like I said, 45 minutes. So Marty Lucas will be talking. He is a full-time radionics practitioner and teacher, and he has clients around the world. He is known for his cutting-edge research and his ability to explain complex subjects in ease to understand and entertaining ways. He is a former trustee for ASD, former board president, and he's now a board member of the United States Psychotronics Association. So if you want information more about Marty, then hopefully Marty can type in any way to get in touch with him. I'm sorry, but this paper doesn't have that on it. So Marty, if you can at some time, just put it in the chat room, and everybody then has the option of downloading it and keeping your contact information if they have more questions. There's also a lounge where you can go afterwards, but I can't guarantee you'll only see Marty and have your questions. Meanwhile, Marty Lucas, you're on.
Thank you, Joan. I hope everybody can hear me now. And let's see. There we go. All right. Well, I've been in and around energy work now for well over 20 years. To know a little about me, I got a small organic farm, retired military officer, and I actually got into energy work through nutrition. And when we found that there were some things that nutrition didn't work for livestock, we got into homeopathy. And when we found that there were things that homeopathy didn't do, then we got into radionics. And the more I studied these different energy modalities, the more I realized how similar they really are. And before I get into my main presentation, I would like to take just a few minutes with all the unrest that's going around us. One of the lessons that sometimes that we overlook, because we like to get into the details, is that we've been taught for thousands of years that the world around us is a reflection of what's going on inside us. And so I've had a number of people that especially my clients and on my different calls, that are looking to see what they can do to help the world. And I'm not going to say that there isn't a lot that we can do to help the world, but if what they teach us is true, that the world around us is a reflection of what's going on inside, then what we can do for the world is take care of that stress, take care of all of those negative things, take care of all that dreck, if you will, that's inside of us, and see how that changes what reflects back to us. Now, one of the major dysfunctions of our society is our attention to details at the expense of the overall picture. I mean, just look at the alternative healthcare industry. There are dozens of modalities, and each one stresses how unique they are. They stress how their modality is the one that can make the difference. They also stress that their modality must be precise, applied precisely in order to work properly. And you get excited and you take their basic course, and they tell you that the real secrets are at the next level. So you take the second level, and then they say that the real secrets are at the third level, and so forth, until you're finally able to enter the highest circle of knowledge available only to those rare individuals that are able to pass through all of the intermediate steps. And if you are lucky, that's where you learn there really aren't any secrets except the power of belief. Now, radionics is somewhat different, but there are areas in our industry that are exactly the same. And we have the story that there's one particular type of instrument that actually has the power to work, and the others are simply placebos, and that this one's much better, and that one is just a waste of money. But we all have a piece of the puzzle, and every modality and every instrument package has its advantages and its disadvantages. And every modality requires intent and belief. And intent and belief are scalar forces. Your brain is a scalar force generator. You see, our reality is not a solid mass of fixed atoms and elements. It's a reality created and maintained by consciousness. Think of it as a scalar hologram. Your thoughts are scalar frequencies. And in order to change reality, all you need to do is have enough energy to change the current pattern. The clearer the picture and the better the focus, the more energy. And your thoughts have that energy. That means the belief of the practitioner is important, and the belief of the recipient can add even more power. So think of the placebo effect not as a byproduct of luck and circumstance, but as part of the fundamental underpinnings that makes all of this work. And that's why all energy work is so closely related to good old-fashioned dowsing. It's simply about understanding our scalar reality is created and maintained by consciousness. From my lecture on Who Answers When I Douse, we understand that thought forms either resonate with reality or they do not. When we're dowsing for answers, all we're really doing is listening with our body to see if our question resonates. If the thought resonates, then we count it as true. If it does not, then we count it as false. When I analyze the subject with my instrument, I am searching for the resonant point of the strength of the frequency's intensity. Well, that's a mouthful. But it's exactly the same thing. Dowsers use their body. Radionics use instruments. Muscle testing, or applied kinesiology, is not really different. When the body resonates with the question, it's strong. When it doesn't, it's weak. In fact, when we examine nearly every energy healing modality, we see there is a foundation of dowsing, and radionics are closely related. They're cousins, as a matter of fact. Think of radionics as a left brain approach to right brain work. Same work, different tools. In dowsing, we form a question. That question has a scalar frequency. Then we check to see if that question is either true or false. More advanced dowsers can also check the relative strength of the resonance of that question. And while dowsing uses the mind itself, radionics uses an instrument to tune into that portion of a frequency. Once I have the frequency tuned in the instrument, it remains fixed. I can go get coffee and check the mail, take a walk, and come back, and it's still there. It's still tuned to that same thought form frequency. With dowsing, I must maintain focus on the question in order to maintain the frequency. And without years of training, most people simply do not have the skills to maintain a single clear thought form for more than a few seconds. So the advantage of consistency and persistence goes to radionics. But thought forms are incredibly complex, multidimensional fractal patterns. That complexity is easy for the mind, but it's not so easy for an instrument. And even with the most sophisticated instrument, I can only capture a fraction of that complexity. For simple analysis, the added complexity of the thought form may not be necessary, but for balancing and influencing, the more complete the pattern, the better the results. So the advantage of complexity and completeness goes to dowsing. The garden variety dowser is typically someone seeking information. This skill by itself can be life-changing, but the more advanced dowser takes it a step further. Not only do they check for resonance of their thought form, they also work to influence the patterns. Raymond Grace is probably the most famous North American example of an active dowser. He has taught thousands of people how to evaluate and then influence their results. His clarity of thought and focus are excellent. His results are excellent as well. He uses standard dowsing to understand the issue. Then he actively works to influence those frequencies into more beneficial patterns. He does so without doubt or hesitation, and his results speak for themselves. The biggest difference between Raymond Grace and many of his students is he knows he can make those changes, and most of his students merely think they can. When you achieve his level of focus, there is no easier way of doing energy work. But without that clarity, you won't see the same results. That's where radionics has the advantage. The instrument provides the persistent clarity and focus. Even though radionics loses much of the complexity of the thought form, it more than makes up for that lack by being able to stay tuned into that frequency indefinitely. When we seek a new frequency, we refer to that as cold scanning. First, we decide what it is we wish to find. We carefully craft the statement of intent that describes the frequency we desire. Then we use that statement to tune the instrument until we find the resonant points. When we record the settings, we have a new frequency. Dowsing is the same thing. In dowsing, we carefully craft our question. In fact, there are many dowsing schools that spend more time on asking the right question, which I would refer to as crafting your intent, than they do on the dowsing itself. Because we know if we ask the wrong question, we will always get the wrong results. So an advantage of radionics is that when I'm using a thought form, my thought form will never be exactly the same as yours. And so our cold scan frequencies will be different. And as my understanding changes, my scans will change as well. Even if my mood changes, the scanned rate will change. That's because I'm trying to capture the resonant frequency of a fractal, layered, multidimensional scalar wave with a three-dimensional instrument. But having said that, each of those individual snapshots may well be enough to achieve the results. It's something to do with the holographic nature of our reality. When I have even the smallest piece, I have access to all the information. The bigger the piece of the picture, the better and the more resonance I'll be able to achieve. Now, with persistence and additional work, I can add fractal layers and additional harmonics, and this makes the frequency much more effective. But as of now, we don't have the capacity to capture more than just a fraction of the complexity of a thought form. Think of it like listening to a beautiful symphony played on a cheap transistor radio. You get the gist of it, but you still miss a lot. Now, I tell people there is nothing you can do with a radionic instrument that you cannot do with intent alone, as long as you can maintain your focused intent long enough and have enough energy to do so. But radionics provides another benefit over simple dowsing. When my instrument is broadcasting, I'm not part of the circuit. I'm not using my own energy. So if there's a negative response from the target, it goes back to the instrument and is dissipated into the ground. So unlike other energy modalities, the radionic operator doesn't take home the energies, emotional debris, or the flotsam. And I don't have to clear myself after a session because I'm not part of the circuit. And this becomes a major advantage when working with intense emotional frequencies and when working with pathogens or on large areas. The instrument makes the connection to the target, not the operator. Another built-in advantage of radionics is the analysis itself provides tremendous detail about the target. Then when I wish to re-examine a project, I can take precisely the same measurements and compare the results to see where progress has been made or where more work needs to be done. Of course, an experienced dowser can do much more and much of the same, but since radionics is very left-brained anyway, the details of the analysis are simply part of the standard work. Now, as an experienced energy worker, I use a number of modalities, including dowsing and radionics. And for simple projects, dowsing is an excellent way to get the information I need and make significant changes. But for larger projects or more complex projects, or those requiring work over time, I prefer radionics. I simply do not want to use my personal energy to balance the toxins out of a large field. I'd much prefer to use the energy of the instrument. And my lab has a large number of instruments working around the clock on different projects. I check and reset them and they continue to work. And I could not do that with dowsing alone. It would take a tremendous amount of concentration and my personal energy to do that work. But with my instrument, I can set it and start to work and even program the instrument when to turn off and when to turn on. So that's a quick comparison between radionics and dowsing. And I'm going to switch over and show you a radionics instrument. And there's many different types of instruments, hundreds if not more. And I can't tell whether or not if the picture is backwards or not. It looks like it's backwards on my screen, but anyway, this is
It looks good, Marty. It looks fine.
It looks fine. Good. Okay, so what we're looking at is a very basic radionics instrument. The original design came in probably the 50s. And this one is a Hieronymus type instrument. This particular instrument is one that I was able to get from my teacher after he passed. And so when we talk about a radionic frequency, what we're talking about is the setting on these dials. And the dials themselves are simply an indication of what's going on in the instrument itself. And when we open up the instrument, there's no mystery or magic. It is a very simple, there we go, what looks like an old-timey radio. Remember and there's the air tuners, which are variable capacitors, and that's where I set my rates. And then it goes through some different circuits where it's then processed into a scalar wave. Now, the reason that radionics works is that what we found is that every electrical signal has an electrical component, it has a magnetic component, and it has a scalar component. And by dialing this instrument into the electrical part of the signal, that allows us to tie into the scalar part of the signal. And since our brains are also scalar devices, what that allows us to do then is we can take, any number of things, and they all have scalar frequencies. So not only does your body have a scalar frequency, but all the different pieces and parts in your body also have scalar frequencies. And so you could dowse and see how your liver is doing if you wanted. There we go. Okay. Or what I can do is I have probably 10 or 20,000 rates. There. And I don't know why the automatic focus isn't automatically focusing, and I do apologize for that. There we go. Okay, so we have all of these rates, and you see, there in the middle, lungs, and the rate is 9283. The 9283 refers to the setting here on the instrument, and so I just set that I just set that at 92. And there you go. And so what we're doing is that's just the setting on that instrument. And I've got tens of thousands of rates where I can analyze all of those things. And this is what radionics people have been doing for the last 50 years or better. Is they would work and they would find the rates for all of these different pieces and parts. So I can analyze the body right down to the cells, the cell membrane, the protoplasm in the cell, everything. I can get right down to the nitty gritty. And that's really where radionics had been for, like I said, for the last 50 years. But one advantage of being in the American Society of Dowsers and working with dowsers is that dowsers typically are much more right-brain people. They're much more holistic people. And so when I start, digging into the details of, the the virus and the parasites and the myceliums and the bacillus coli and all the rest of these things, what I found was that the dowsers were looking at different things. The dowsers were looking at things on a much more holistic level. And that allowed me to start looking at how can I take what the dowsers are doing and bringing it to a more advanced level, a more useful level. And so certainly if somebody comes to me with an issue, and let's say they've got an issue with their pet, I can dial in and I can find the level of the frequency of the E. coli 123 in the small intestine, and I can measure all the toxins that are there. I can measure the oxygen level at that point. I can measure everything I wanted to do at, in those individual pieces of, the target, whether it's plant, animal, or soil. But the thing is that all of those toxins, all of those E. coli's, all of those infections are all simply symptoms of something else that's going on. And what we're looking for is not to find what that symptom is. What we're looking for is to find the cause. We're looking for the cause behind the cause behind the cause. And that took me to going deeper into the finding out what the cause was. If the diseases that are in our body are all symptoms of what's going on energetically, then why work on the symptom? Why not work on the cause? And so a few years ago, as I was working on the cause behind the cause behind the cause, I built a reagent for the Ho'oponopono. Now, the Ho'oponopono is a Hawaiian prayer of love, forgiveness, and gratitude. It's, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. Because it has reality in our 3D, it has a scalar frequency. Because it has a scalar frequency, I can capture that scalar frequency with my instrument. And when I can capture with my instrument, then I can record it into a substrate. In this case, I have recorded it into a solid quartz rod. This is not significantly different than what you do when you are imprinting crystals. So if you hold a crystal in your hand and you hold a thought form with that crystal, then what you can do is you can put that thought form into that crystal. And many of you already do that. Many of you do it regularly. Many of you put love or whatever into your crystals, put that into your jewelry. That's pretty common. We can do that with radionics as well. And I got a question, something about a black screen. Not sure what's going on with the black screen. Um, you know, hopefully it'll come back.
Ask her to go up to the top of her screen to the blue bar menu, and she can click on the camera and see if that'll help.
Anyway, so now this particular frequency of the Ho'oponopono, if you were to take that prayer and put it into a crystal that you had, you would have to keep that thought form in your mind of that entire poem as you were imprinting the crystal. I simply don't have that power of concentration. And so when I built the Ho'oponopono, I captured pieces of that frequency and recorded it a piece at a time. So I recorded the what I would consider the base frequency of the Ho'oponopono, and then I recorded the fractal layers of it above and below. And as I recorded those fractal layers, then it became much more powerful, and the energy became much stronger. For those of you that can feel energy through the screen, the Ho'oponopono is a phenomenal tool that I use all of the time. As I continued my work, gosh, and we've all worked with love. We talk about sending love to somebody. Well, in my mind, as I'm building a reagent, what I'm doing is I'm building it based upon my thought forms. And so my idea of love is not rainbows and unicorns. My idea of love is unfettered communication, completely unimpeded communication. And so when I built the reagent for love, I was looking at that unimpeded communication of love. And then what I found is not only does it have fractal layers, but it also has logarithmic layers. And so the scientific part of that, it got to be quite complex as I built this particular love reagent. Gosh, imagine that. Something as simple as unimpeded communication is also very, very complex. But what I found with this reagent, and along with the Ho'oponopono, is that I can use it and broadcast that frequency, and things go away. Healing begins. Insect infestations in fields go away. Emotional issues go away. Now, why on earth would a poem about love and forgiveness and gratitude have any effect on the soil? Now, your left brain, if you've studied soil, can tell you all about the chemistry of the soil and the balance of the minerals and the life in the soil and the nematodes and the worms and the different insects and the whatevers in the fungi. So why would broadcasting something like the Ho'oponopono or love or compassion or light have any change in the soil? The only way that that could have any effect on the soil is if the creatures in that soil and the soil itself are sentient as well. The only way that that would affect the soil is if we are in fact connected to it. When I discovered that and I began studying it and I began realizing the implications of all of us being connected, it absolutely turned my world upside down. Because instead of balancing calcium and magnesium and potash and trying to support the actinomyces and all of the other stuff in the soil, I could do a lot more good in a lot less time by simply broadcasting the Ho'oponopono and love. There we go. So if the soil will hold those frequencies and make those changes as dowsers, we can also check to see what those energy levels are around our homes, around our property, maybe even our car. If I can broadcast the Ho'oponopono and make changes in the soil, what can I do around my farm? What can I do for my community? What can I do elsewhere? And so I began to work, and I broadcast love and light and compassion here around my farm. And at some point, what I found was that there was so much trauma in the field that I needed a way to dissolve that trauma so that there would be a place for that love to go. And as I began pushing out that frequency from around the farm, what I found was that it was somewhat contagious and it began to spread. And I could actually measure the effect not only on my farm, but on the neighbor's farm as well. Now, I don't have permission to broadcast to the neighbor's farm. I don't have permission to do those things to him. And so what I was doing was I was simply getting the resonance of my property high enough so that their properties around me would start to resonate with those same frequencies, the love, the light, the compassion, the Ho'oponopono, and the trauma. Now, about a mile from the farm here up on the hill is a hog confinement building. Now, for those of you that have been around factory livestock, imagine a hog confinement building being like a barracks at Auschwitz concentration camp. The energy around there is just so heavy and so ugly that what I find regularly throughout the season is there's a dumpster there beside the building, and that dumpster will be clear full of dead animals. When I broadcast to my farm the Ho'oponopono, the love, the light, the compassion, and take the trauma out, and I work on my area and I work on me, what I find is I don't see as many dead animals at that hog confinement up on the hill. And when I do see that dumpster full, it's because I haven't been doing my work. It's almost as if the world around me is reflecting what's going on in me. So when I take care of me and I take care of mine, which in this case, my farm, then the world around me begins to reflect those changes and things get better. Wow. And in that Huna tradition where you say, I am sorry, please forgive me, it's because they say that everything that happens in our life or around us is a reflection and is because of us. And so those things that are happening in and around us are either because we are teaching lessons or we're learning those lessons. And if somebody else is suffering, then they are suffering in part because of us. So as we see the ugliness in the world around us, how much of that is inside of us? How much of it is for us to learn, and how much of it is for us to teach? Well, I'm not really a touchy-feely fellow, and I'm really not one, again, to get into the rainbows and unicorns. But for me and mine,
okay, now I hear him.
For me and mine, what I can do is get into the love, the light, the compassion, the Ho'oponopono, and I can embed that into the soil of my property. And think about it. How many times have we heard about curses being left on a property or the ugly energies of some terrible event on a property or on the land? Well, if that stuff can happen accidentally or even deliberately with malintent, can't we do the same with positive things? Can't we do the same with the love, the light, and the compassion? Well, we absolutely can. I can do it with my instrument, and we can do it with our power of intent, and we can do it with the power of our own scalar wave generator that is right between our ears. I did an experiment at a class here a few months ago, and we were in a very nondescript hotel in a very nondescript city, very, very normal. But in the middle of the hotel was a solid stone hearth with a fireplace. And you've seen those solid stone hearths and fireplaces all over. And so one of the exercises that we led the class in was that we all used our intent to embed the Ho'oponopono and to potentize or to write those frequencies of the Ho'oponopono into the stone in that hearth. Because we know that crystals hold energy. And we know that the sand in the mortar between the bricks are crystals. They're quartz. And so they'll hold frequency. We know that the bricks themselves will hold frequency. And so we did an experiment where we embedded and we potentized the frequencies of the Ho'oponopono into that hearth. Now, I can't tell you what good it's done. I can't tell you if there's been life changed, but I can tell you that you can douse it right now, and a certain portion of that energy is still in that hearth. And so maybe, just maybe, when somebody is having a rough day and they go into that hotel and they sit down at that hearth, they'll feel those energies when they really need them. Maybe there'll be a young couple that stopped in that hotel and they just need that love, light, and forgiveness. And for all of us that have been married, we know that we need love, light, and forgiveness at one time or another, and most times, perhaps. What a great way to do a civil service project. And it was quite easy. A little while later, I was working with another group of dowsers, and we were looking at the trauma of the world at that time. And so instead of standing around and putting our hands on the hearth and potentizing the hearth, what we did is, through our power of intent alone, we potentized a bridge in the DC metro area with the Ho'oponopono. And then over the next days and weeks, what we did is, with our dowsing, we checked to see, how many small things, how many small evil things were avoided, how many good things happened because of that work, and how long that frequency would last. Now, we don't know for precisely, because it is a very imprecise science, but your dowsing can tell you the work that you're doing. And your dowsing, you absolutely have to trust it. The more you work with dowsing or any of the energy tools, and that's the one thing that radionics has done for me, it's allowed me to learn to trust my intuition. The more I learn to trust my intuition, the stronger my intuition gets, and the better my radionics work becomes. So regardless of what healing modality that you get into, what you'll find is that by going into yourself, clearing yourself, and perfecting your skills as a dowser, you'll be able to do all the other energy modalities even better. Yeah, and sometimes when I'm doing my work, I just need a little extra mental clarity. Mental clarity has a thought form. Now, you have a thought form about what mental clarity means, and I have a thought form about what mental clarity means, and perhaps between the two of those, they would be very, very similar. They wouldn't be perfectly the same. But what I found is that my thought form of mental clarity can be very powerful. What I found is that life force. Now, this was one that took some considerable time and effort to put together. But with life force, and we have kind of an idea about what life force is. And with that life force, but as we, I'll see if I can find where that noise is coming from. If you've got some background noise, it would be really helpful if you'd mute yourself. Perfect. It went away. Sounded like somebody was eating something. I suppose it is that time of day. But with the life force, what I found was that life force is a process. And as life force is a process, uh, by broadcasting that process, it supports the entire body. And this is the advantage again of the radionics over some of the other work. So cell energy was kind of a cool one, and the reason that I bring it in is because this is based on the work of, thank you, Nancy. This is based on the work of a virologist who said that one of the issues with many diseases is that the protoplasm in the cell loses its structure. And when it loses its structure, the cell is not able to maintain its energy or process energy properly, and it loses the vital charge across the cell membrane. And so as that cell loses its energy, then it begins to form into clumps, and the clumps form into whatever they form into. So what I really wanted to find out was, how can I restructure the protoplasm in that cell? We know how to structure water, and for those of us who have been around the dowsing for a long time, we know how to do that. So how do I process, or how do I structure the protoplasm in that cell? And when I structure the protoplasm in that cell, what happens? Well, again, this is a thought form. If I went at trying to use everything that I understand about cell metabolism and everything I understand about anatomy and everything else, what I found was that I could use the thought form of restore the structure of the cellular protoplasm. I could use that thought form. I could capture the frequency of that thought form. I could let source, or if you will, the subconscious or spirit or whoever, take care of all the details. And I didn't have to know all the rest of that stuff. And that's one thing that the dowsers have really, shown me, and I've learned from the dowsers, is that when you tie into that source spirit, when you tie into that source energy, when you tie into that direct connection with your intuition, you don't have to know the details, because all of the information is already there in the hologram. It's already there in the morphogenic field. All you're really looking for is not the information itself, but simply the address where that information is stored. So if you can think of it, you can create it. And as dowsers, I want each of you to consider that and start doing even small things. Now, with my instruments, I can do some fairly incredible and complex things, and that's okay. But me doing one or two really things that I think is really cool is not going to be as life-changing for you as you doing those things that you can do. So if nothing else, when you reach into your pocket and you pull out the change that's in your pocket, just go ahead and hold it in your hands. And as you're holding it in your hands, add that energy of, maybe it's just love that you want to add. Maybe it's just the Ho'oponopono. Maybe it is just forgiveness. Whatever it is, you can start potentizing the things around your home with your intent. You can do that. You have the ability to do that. You have the ability to start putting blessings on things. And as I close out the first part of the presentations, let's talk about what a blessing is. Now, we think of a blessing as whatever we think of it as. We get the blessing at the church, or somebody sneezes and we say bless you or whatever. But let's put a definition on blessing. If I define that blessing as connecting to source. So if I'm offering a blessing to someone or something, and what I'm offering them is to connect them to source, then that really is indeed quite a blessing. So instead of thinking of bless you as something you would say when somebody sneezes, or if you're in the South and you really are upset with somebody, you go, well, bless their heart. Let's take that word bless and let's define it as connection to source. Now I can turn the other cheek. And now I can offer a blessing even to my worst enemy, even to somebody that I consider to be an absolute whatever. But now what I can do is I can offer that blessing to them, and that blessing is in fact exactly that and more. It is an offer to connect them to source. And when we connect somebody to source, is there really anything better that we can do for them? I think it's better than the Ho'oponopono. And so as I use the Ho'oponopono for balancing soils for a number of years, lately, I use my reagent that I call Bless, because it is even more powerful and more effective. Okay, so with that, everybody, I have talked for 45 minutes, and for those that know me know
Yes.
that I really enjoy the kind of voice. Go ahead, Joan.
I've just asked people to type in questions, and then they can raise their hand and we can get to their questions in the order that they've put them in. Is that okay with you?
That works like a champ. Thank you.
Okay.
So it looks like either my presentation was brilliant and that all questions are answered, or it was a complete muddled, who knows. But it could be either way.
There's one question from Robin that says, are the rates the same as frequencies?
We refer to in radionics, we refer to the rates as frequencies and the frequencies as rates. But they are not the same as what you would find like a radio frequency or a Rife frequency or something like that. It's really, when we are talking about a rate, all we're really talking about is simply the position of the tuning dials in there. So if you can see move this back a little bit, as you see the tuner in there, and as I turn, I guess you can see it, and as I turn that, the rates that we are so proud of and that we use indefinitely are, and we dial in the 9-91 or whatever. All we're really doing is acknowledging that at 10% of the plates in the air tuner are engaged. At 50% of the plates are engaged. So the rates are simply that. They're not really a frequency like you would have in a radio frequency or a Rife frequency.
Okay, there's another question. The water in the tubes, do you drink it or hold it?
Actually, it's even better. This is a solid quartz tube. And so I can use this to charge water, which you could drink. And really, that's exactly what you do when you're asking for the blessing over your food, is you are charging that food. So I can broadcast this, I can carry it on my person, or I can go ahead and use that to charge water and then drink it, or charge anything and drink it. What it does, it's like it's very much like homeopathy. Let's see. So how do you make the vials and reagents? There's an attachment that I used for the instrument that actually potentizes that into them, so that I don't have to use my own energy to do that. And it's called a replicator, is what it is. And uh, or putting him in the witness. And again, yeah, we've got some really good classes that we offer throughout the year on learning radionics, and we've got some videos that are coming out. And I've got a lot of information on my website at radionics.us. So if you go to radionics.us, oh, there we go. In fact, I can put that in there.
Marty,
So there's a lot of, yes.
Marty, if you could type it into the chat, my screen does not allow me to type for some reason. So what you sent me in an email, I cannot put up. So if you could put your info so they could get in touch with you, that would be great.
Great. Okay, it says some radionics instruments are electrically connected and some are not. Does one work better than the other? The standard instrument that I have and that I use is an analog instrument, and that gives me a lot of control because I'm not using anybody else's programming. I'm not using I'm not confined by anybody else's thought forms. The electronic ones that are pre-programmed sometimes are much faster, but again, at that point, you are relying upon somebody else's thought form, and so you can't do as much exploring in the electronic machines or as easily as you can with those. They both have their place. They're wonderful instruments. I use and recommend the Kelly instruments, but the other instruments are very good as well. And some have lots of dials, absolutely. And it comes from where it came from. The European units have dozens of dials, and they have a different way of tuning into that scalar frequency. So the electronics in the instrument, all we're trying to do is find the electronic part of that scalar wave. And there's many different ways to get to it. But so if I get to it with a dozen dials, or if I get to it with just a few dials, or if I get to it electronically, once I get to it, then I can do it. And the frequency of blessings using the pendulum, if you haven't been to a Raymond Grace class, that's almost a given. And again, what you're doing, and some people will disagree with me on this when it comes with using a pendulum. And I don't find that the pendulums themselves have a lot of power in and of themselves. They do help you focus, and they do help you resonate with what you're doing. But the advantage of using a pendulum when you're sending love or blessings or whatever is, as you're holding that pendulum and it is spinning, it is helping you maintain your thought form. It's helping you maintain your focus.
You have a question,
blessing.
Marty?
I do.
What blessing?
For those who have the intention, the question is, what blessing do you have for those whose intention is to kill others or put others down or to build themselves up? Okay. If you think about it, the people that do those things are not connected to source. Now, we can debate on what they are connected to, but people that are connected to source don't do those things. It's kind of like one of the traditions that comes, not the standard interpretation of the Ten Commandments, but one of the other interpretations of the Ten Commandments is they aren't commandments, but they are attributes of people with certain level of spiritual growth. And so if I've got somebody whose intention is to do evil, the best thing I can do is connect them to source and let source figure out who else they're connected to and straighten it out. Now you're right. From their perspective, they perhaps are connected to source or even more. But again, if we understand, and certainly we can get into a connection, if their source is not compatible with yours, so let's say, for instance, that they are connected to what you would consider evil, uh, and that source does not resonate with your source, well, let evil and your source figure it out and just offer them that blessing. Most of the time, when you offer a blessing or even the Ho'oponopono, if the people that you offer that to don't resonate with it, they will leave. They will either begin to resonate with it or they will leave your life. So you absolutely send them love. What is love? Love is the unimpeded communication and flow of information. And and that's tough for me. From my background, the with Midwest uh, conservative military background, the idea of turning the other cheek, uh, I tell you what, that was a tough one for me. And,
Five,
it's still
5 minutes,
ingrained.
Marty.
Uh,
5 minutes.
Thank you. And it's still ingrained. It is tough. But think about the hog confinement building up on top of the hill. By sending love, gratitude, and forgiveness to my farm, it spreads into what's around me by taking care of my own stuff and connecting more deeply to my source. I begin to resonate, and it begins to attract people into uh, into my life that resonate with me. And so as I'm doing this work, and as I what I'm finding is that the more I work on me, the better life around me. And even this last week, and for those that follow astrology, with what 3 or 4 planets are in retrograde, and Mercury's in retrograde, and the whole world is in confusion. What I found was that even as my equipment was breaking down around me, and one project after another was turning into a storm, when I focused on the moment, and when I looked for the joy in the moment, and when I found that joy, things got better. Now, the tire was still flat on the tractor, or the alternator was still broken, or the bolt was broken, or whatever was broken. But when I focused on me and focused on the joy of the moment, everything around me got better. And they tell us that our perspective is our reality. And so I personally believe that we can physically change the reality. But even if you don't believe that you can change reality, when you change your focus, you absolutely change your reality. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have blown the entire, almost the entire 15 minutes just talking. Are there any other questions or anything that I can offer for you, while you're here? And I want to thank everybody for coming. It's a phenomenal opportunity to be able to share my work with the Dowsers. I love the Dowsers. You folks have done so much for me, and I appreciate that. And throughout the rest of the conference, and even as we're looking around us, in the real world where things seem to be going, completely haywire, step into yourself. Find out what it is that the world is reflecting back into you, and use your skills as an energy worker and a dowser to make those changes that you need to make so that your world gets a little happier, gets a little brighter. Ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't get everything you needed from my presentation this morning, I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Joan, it's all yours.
No, wait, Marty? Marty?
Yeah.
Don't go away,
Yes.
Marty.
All right, I'm here.
My little chat thing was not able to type. So I was trying to guess because I don't even see where you can type. So please type in your information so people have it in case they want to contact you.
And my Facebook is Every Advantage. There we go. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.